Hey there, V from Movies Hunter. Welcome to the wide world of London Fields, the crime mystery thriller that had audiences on the edge of their seats in 2018. This film was a real mind-bending roller coaster of twists and turns, and I can't wait to spill the beans on what went down. Grab a drink, hold on tight, because things are about to get suspenseful, and maybe a little silly. Samson Young, the terminally ill American writer, stumbles upon a new opportunity when he arrives in London. Mark, a fellow writer, offers to swap apartments. Samson can hardly contain his excitement when he checks out the apartment. It's a fancy schmancy wonderland. But just as he is about to explore more, his trusty driver Keith shows up and drags him to a pub called the Black Cross. Enter Guy Clinch, the latest in a long line of successful business tycoons, and the definition of a polite gentleman, or so he seems. It turns out Keith has taken a few too many loans from some less than reputable loan sharks, and Guy is one of the people he's borrowed from. But before they can discuss this sticky situation, a stunning young woman named Nicola walks into the pub fresh off a funeral. All the men are smitten with her beauty, but Keith takes the cake when he starts flirting up a storm. Guy tries to play it cool, but he's not immune to her charm either, and even our terminally ill protagonist, Samson, can't help but feel a little green with envy. Nicola leaves the pub thanking everyone for their hospitality, and Keith immediately goes after her like a lovesick puppy. Guy warns Keith to stay away, but of course he ignores him. Guy and Samson both feel a twinge of jealousy, but they're better men than that. They choose to keep their dignity instead of chasing after a beautiful woman. Later on, Samson hears some noise from the apartment above and goes to check it out. And what do you know? He discovers that his neighbor, Nicola, lives just above him. The next day, Samson decides to play detective and follows Nicola to a park where she starts dumping some books into a trash bin. Being the curious cat that he is, Samson picks up the books and starts reading. And what does he find? That Nicola has the power to see into the future and knows how people are going to die. This sounds like a wild ride already, doesn't it? So the next thing that happens is Samson approaches Nicola and asks if she would like to be the central character in his novel, and she agrees because he wouldn't want the world to know about her unique powers, right? And here comes the twist. Samson starts secretly recording Nicola's conversations using recording devices placed between the cracks of the roof. All the while, he is fantasizing about the fame he's going to get from his novel. Just when you thought things couldn't get any more interesting, Keith shows up to meet Nicola and she asks about his family. Keith mentions that he has a wife and a daughter and she tells him to arrange a meeting with Guy. So Keith goes straight to Guy and tells him to call Nicola. She then tells Guy, "Oh, help me, I'm a helpless damsel in distress and need someone to find my friend in Burma." And Guy, being the clawless sap that he is, falls for her act, hook, line, and sinker. They have lunch together, and as they're walking out, Nicola sees Guy's car and freaks out because according to her future visions, that's where she's going to meet her untimely demise. So Samson and Nicola spend the next few days trying to figure out who's going to kill Nicola, because apparently Guy is falling in love with her and she's convinced it's him. So Samson goes to have a little chat with Guy and finds out that Guy is just a sad, lonely man with a son who's a complete hot mess and a wife who wouldn't care less about him. After that, he goes to meet Keith and his family, who just so happens to be in some serious debt to a loan shark, who also just so happens to be his darts rival. During a darts competition, Keith impresses everyone with his skills, while Guy and Nicola share a kiss. Finally, something exciting for poor Guy in his boring marriage life. Whatever. The next day, Keith saunters into the room and is greeted with a sight he never thought he'd see. Nicola, who was once a simple and naive woman, has transformed into a smoking hot seductress. She tells Keith that she has a proposition for him. He has got money problems and she's got a solution. She pulls out a stack of cash from her underwear, which Keith can have if he can take it without touching her. Just then, Guy swaggers in, ready to spoil the party. He calls for Nicola and Keith thinks he's about to get caught. But no, Keith manages to grab the cash without even brushing against her, which just makes Nicola all the more teasing. Guy comes in and tells Nicola that he couldn't find her friend in Burma, but don't worry, he's brought a gift to make up for it. Now, after 9 years of marriage, Guy is finally feeling love for someone and he's going all out. Nicola gives him her earrings to sell because she's found her friend and needs money for a plane ticket. But Guy won't hear of it. He will take care of all expenses. Yeah, sugar daddy. Nicola then goes to meet an agent to get her friend from Burma while Guy stays out of the way to avoid any complications. After the man leaves, Guy asks how much it would cost, to which Nicola coolly replies, $60,000. Even though it's a lot of money, Guy agrees. To show her gratitude, Nicola gives him a little love tap and then leaves. Later, Samson tells Nicola that she's got to try and dodge the Grim Reaper at least once. But Nicola's all like, "Nah, I'm cool with my fate. I'll just go out in a blaze of glory." And then she tries to plant one on Samson, but he's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold up there, tiger. Let's keep things professional." One day, they hit up a fancy restaurant, and Samson starts preaching to her about how the reader will never see her as anything other than a male fantasy figure. But Nicola is like, excuse me, I know something you don't know. I know you're dying. And Samson is like, yeah, well, I got a book to finish first. Later that night, Nicola calls Guy, blah blah blah, and drops the bomb that she can't see him anymore and doesn't need his cash. And then she calls Keith and tells him to call Guy and tell him she's flipping out and selling all her stuff. So Keith rushes over to Guy and tells him Nicola's about to fly the coop. Meanwhile, Nicola and Samson are having a deep and meaningful conversation about how complicated their relationship is. Samson's all like, I want to get to know you better, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna kick the bucket any day now. Bada boom. And then Guy walks in. He's livid when he finds out she's leaving tomorrow and shoves the cash at her, telling her she can't leave because he's in love with her. And to show her gratitude, Nicola gives him a smooch that would make even the dead sit up and take notice. Later on, Samson mails his novel, The Murdery, to his publicists Missy and Mark, but Missy's all like, sorry buddy, I ain't publishing this because I think it's about me. And Mark's like, I admire your balls, but I can't publish this either. So our boy Samson is feeling down in the dumps and decides to take a trip up to the roof. That's where he meets the sultry and seductive Nicola, and let me tell you, these two have a real connection. They're both on the brink of death and they're both so darn lonely in life, it's almost like they were meant to find each other. Next thing you know, Nicola is playing the role of a social worker and sauntering over to Keith's house. She meets the lovely couple, Kath and Keith, and their innocent daughter. And of course, Nicola just can't help but take a jab at the way they live their lives. Oh, and she goes ahead and threatens to take their daughter away from them just for kicks. Later that night, Keith pays Nicola a visit to give her a peace of mind, but she just laughs it off and hands him the money to pay off his loan. She tells him to step up his game and get himself a TV show, and just like that, Keith is putting in her hands. But before he can bask in the glory of his newfound success, he is snatched up by Chick and his gang. But don't worry, Keith knows how to handle these guys. He hands over all the money he owes them, plus interest, and they're on their way. At the darts tournament, Keith is feeling pretty confident. He has got 4 winning streaks under his belt and he's never lost a match. But as the tournament progresses, his confidence only grows. So he decides to challenge Chick to a match, and let me tell you, these two men bring the heat. Back at Nicola's apartment, Keith and Nicola are getting down to business. And by business, I mean they're having some pretty aggressive lovemaking. Meanwhile, Guy finds out from one of Keith's friends that Nicola has Keith wrapped around her finger. He is her toy and they're doing the deed every day. Meanwhile, Samson is going through Mark's books and stumbles upon some steamy pictures of Mark and Nicola. Little does he know, he's just another pawn in their twisted game. Meanwhile, Guy walks in on Keith and Nicola and gets a little too suspicious about their relationship. But Nicola plays the innocent card and convinces him that there's nothing going on between them. So Guy pours out his love for her and they get intimate, with Guy thinking he's the first man in her life and being so dumb. But before he can finish, Nicola pulls the rug from under him and asks him to come clean to his wife. The next day, Samson confronts Nicola about her relationship with Mark, and she reveals that Mark never finished his story and found a way out of her grasp. And then Guy drops the bomb on his wife about his relationship with Nicola, and she slaps him. He leaves his 9-year relationship for a 9-week fling with Nicola. But just as he's feeling good about things, Nicola sends him a book and he realizes that he has been played the entire time, and she never loved him. Ooh. Meanwhile, Keith's got his game face on, ready to take on Chick in the finale. But then Chick goes ahead and starts flirting with Nicola, causing Keith to lose his focus and perform like a total amateur. Meanwhile, Guy shows up and tries to play hero, but he's shut down by both Keith and Chick. And let's not forget the icing on the cake. Nicola kisses Chick right in front of a heartbroken Keith, leading him to a crushing defeat. But the real fun starts when Guy is waiting in his car outside Nicola's building and jumps Keith, brutally beating him like it's nobody's business. That's when Samson steps in to play hero, sending Keith home before going to confront Guy himself. And this is where the plot really thickens, because when Nicola finally reaches home, she is stunned to see that her killer is neither Keith nor Guy, but Samson. He kills her with a hammer, takes her back to Mark's apartment, prints his novel, renames it London Fields, leaves a note, and lies next to her in peace. Fast forward to the next morning, Mark comes home and stumbles upon the scene of the crime. But wait, what's this? A novel, and it is written by Samson. Mark is so impressed that he decides to sell it under his own name, and voila! Instant bestseller. Keith and Kath are left fuming as they watch Mark on TV, and that, my friends, is the story of London Fields. It's weird, and I don't like it. But okay, see you in the next time. Love you, bye, 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 bye.